All right, let's talk new prayers. I will be referencing EddieCon throughout this video. He made a video on his own thoughts, which I'll link below. For the most part, I agree with him entirely. My general thoughts are that these are close to being good, but need refinement. A lot of the prayers are completely useless, and others are incredibly overpowered. There's many locations these are unusable, and many you'd be silly not to use them. Ideally, the prayer book should always be used at any activity at the highest level. There shouldn't be a competitive speedrun done on the old prayer book. It should be something that adds depth and complexity, and something you start using once you feel very comfortable at any given PVM. Before we get into it, the order for the prayers is absolutely atrocious. RuneLite is capable of reordering prayers and needs to be allowed to introduce it ASAP. But beyond that, the default order needs to be much better than it is in the beta. Currently, there is no rhyme or reason to any of the prayer locations. Protections are in the top left, offensives are below that and shifted to the right 2 slots. To flick Vows, Gambit, protections, and offensives, your mouse needs to travel the entire prayer book. The default prayer book has literally everything you need in a small 3x3 block in the bottom middle. The new book should match this. The design of the prayers are not easy to digest either. The old prayer book has blue highlighting on the offensive prayers, making a clear chunk of offensives with obvious coloration, distinguishing them from each other. Everything uses incredibly bright colors on the new book, regardless of what it does, and a lot of them bleed together. Anyways, let's go through the list. Rejuvenation. This is the same as Rapid Heal with some weird differences. It's still not worth using for health due to insane drain rate, even with the faster regeneration. All it did was change tightrope skip setups. I don't know why this is different from Rapid Heal at all. Just make it the same, please. Ruinous Grace. This one is bugged or unintentionally terrible. This drains about 5 prayer points per run energy at 0 prayer bonus, and that is the only thing that affects it. At max prayer bonus, it's between 1 to 2 prayer points per run energy. This is worse in every way than Vile Vigor, even at max prayer bonus, and that spell is completely useless outside of CMs and maybe some other very rare cases. Honestly, this one can just get scrapped. I'm not sure what they're really going for here. Deflect prayers. Okay, the chip damage from these is either not noticeable or makes content undoable. Inferno is basically impossible with new prayers due to the insane chip damage from Jads. You're looking at roughly 3 to 4 brews dedicated to Jads just to survive them. I didn't get to test a lot of Toa due to lack of Yellow Kiris. Please add that. But the chip damage was extremely bad in Monkey Room and Kefre due to Spitting Scarab. Likely Zebak and Warden would be bad too. I didn't really get to them. Definitely manageable in Toa. In Tob, it's not really noticeable at all, and by extension, the prayers are incredibly strong there. In CM, it's manageable, but it's definitely a problem at places like Mystics, Muttadile, and Ulm. Addy suggested increased damage on wrong prayer instead. This would be an improvement, but introduces problems for monsters that have multiple damage types that aren't guaranteed. Like Inferno Bloblets, Muttadile, Ulm, and Zulrah. Since you don't know what attacks these monsters will be using or can't pray against all of them, it's just extra damage, which could be kind of annoying. This probably is still better than chip damage, and I'm not sure there's a perfect solution here. Trinitas, I voted no to this. It's still as dumb as it was when it was proposed. Scrap it. It's a low-skill prayer on the high-skill prayer book. Dumb. Berserker, it's fine as is. It drains a little more than Preserve. It's not a big deal. Metabolize. Scrap it. This prayer doesn't actually have much use since it doesn't allow you to eat any faster. You never want to eat hard food when mid-combat typically anyways. It also has ridiculous prayer drain, which doesn't help. Offensive prayers? These all feel like they're in a good place damage-wise. I think they should remain as is. Not much to talk about here. Rebuke? I really like this prayer. Its usage is pretty rare, but it can do some very cool things. I loved Venge bombing Tecton with this, raising his max hit to 100. Sheesh! That added damage is very substantial when paired with Venge. We're getting into the Vows. These all need a lot of work. I think for the most part, they should offer neat effects, but not something you can't for damage. More so something you slap on in unique cases or for utility. They drain so much prayer that making any of these pure damage, like Glacies is currently, Means you basically have to one-tick flick it and use it everywhere. We're looking for utility which adds an effect on a target, not camping. Alright, Fumus Vow. This was insanely powerful in the beta, and also came with a bug that allowed us to one-shot every single boss instantly. When they change it, you will no longer be able to pre-pot getting poisoned, and it will only work if the target directly applied poison to you. After this is changed, it really isn't going to have much use, and probably won't even work in places with area poison like Zarpus or Vorkath. This will become the Lizardman Shaman and Spitting Scarab Prayer, and that'll really be it. They could maybe look into making the poison heal you instead, as well as wearing off quickly, maybe? Probably make a Drain Prayer on each proc if they choose to go this direction, so it's not necessarily worth getting poisoned or forgetting anti-poison. Ambers Vow? This one is perfect as is. I love this prayer, and it's a nice touch that its effect takes place before defense draining special attacks. Keep it exactly as it is, it's great. Cruor's Vow. This prayer is absolutely, utterly, completely useless. A huge prayer drain for the benefit of healing 1 per 100 damage dealt. Sustaining prayers that are just camped to get HP slowly are not only boring, they also can't really be balanced. They're either necessary to camp constantly or never used. I was bouncing an idea for a bleed replacement with Saxor Pillar in my Discord. We came up with something a bit more interesting. We were inspired by Zebak's Bleed Chomp attack, and it would fit thematically. Make it so on each hit splat on a target with this prayer active, it adds a stack of bleed, perhaps requiring multiple splats per bleed tick to build up, encouraging multi-splat weapons like Scythe and Claws. After a stack is built, if the target moves, it would hemorrhage, dealing damage over time. Each additional stack would increase the duration the bleed lasts and the damage per splat, similar to poison. After you inflict bleed on a target, you wouldn't be able to inflict any more bleed stacks until the bleed ends, maybe with added cooldown to after it ends as well before you can add more. This would mean you don't need to camp it constantly, and would only really be effective on bosses that you can keep stationary and then move tactically. Bosses that you are constantly running around like solo God Wars would be fairly ineffective. I'm picturing this being nasty on bosses like Bloat and Tecton, where they stand still for periods and then move. This would also work well at a lot of standard bosses, Thermi, Cerberus, God Wars bosses in groups, but not anywhere the boss is completely stationary and unmovable. Glacy's Vow? This prayer is nearly as useless as Cruor's is currently. To show this, let's assume you have 14 DPS. This is the same as max melee Scythe against a 0 defense Maiden, which is basically as high as DPS can possibly get against a target. If that 20% chance to deal 10% of your damage hit every time, which it doesn't, it's incredibly inaccurate, it adds 0.28 DPS. When you then take that number and roll it using your current bonuses against the target's mage defense, you're looking at probably somewhere around 0.1 added DPS if I'm being very generous. A Thrall, for comparison, adds 0.625 DPS. The only place it's accurate would be Thermi, adding 0.2 DPS. Amazing! Summon a Thrall for 6 prayer points for much more damage that lasts a long time, or spend prayer points on each swing to get a tiny fraction of that damage. Design-wise, this prayer is dumb as well. Camp this for a tiny amount of mage damage? It's boring and uninteresting. Only thing going forward is you need to consider opponent's mage level, which is interesting, but almost every single boss has high mage level. Addy suggested this could be the same thing Ambers Vow does, but for mage, which would honestly be perfect. Slap this on early when maging a target to increase accuracy, then remove for different vow after. Vindication? This was my suggestion that made it in. Unfortunately, locator spam makes the damage buff from this very broken. The meta is now take locator orb everywhere for damage. The reduced health from this prayer is a little silly, but it doesn't prevent Vespula or Tightrope as people may have thought. If you are 10 or lower HP at Vesp, you need to brew to prevent chancing, and Tyro Skip now always requires brewing when going to Crystal. A 3 HP skip is guaranteed death, so there's a 1 out of 6 chance the run is bricked. The lower HP doesn't improve the prayer. I'd prefer it heal the same amount as regular Redemption and instead give an accuracy buff instead of damage. This makes it useful, but not enough that you would locator spam for it likely. Gambit. This prayer is great. Flicking to it is fun, but it's not a huge enough buff that it feels necessary anywhere. It's incredibly powerful at Tecton, and I had a lot of fun flicking it at range vanguards with step unders. This also works with Next. It's fun to use but doesn't feel overpowered. Perfect. Overall, the prayers are good and just need some work. The whole thing does not need to be scrapped, and it doesn't need to be replaced by ancient curses from RS3 as Reddit wants. I think they're really close to something good. They need to keep updating the beta and trying things until we get something that works well. Also, please give me Yellow Kyrus and Venator Bow so I can actually properly test content. Thanks. That's all she wrote. Leave a like if you liked it, and or subscribe. Thanks, guys.